Hi everybody, we are live. This is Tom Salt. I'm a medical doctor and functional medicine practitioner.
I'm Elizabeth, a registered nurse and whole life coach.
And this is Just Be Well. We are about whole life wellness. Today we are talking about the intersection of the body, mind, heart, and soul. You know, the idea for many of our patients is that they have done, oh, I forgot to change my glasses. I got my Presto Changeos on again. Anyway, we see patients and they have done it all, right? They've been to a zillion people. They've been to their local doctor. They've been to the local specialist. They've been to the, university hospital, the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, any famous place you can think of. They've been to a bunch of really skilled people. They've been to a bunch of really skilled alternative practitioners. They've done all the diets. They've done all the supplements. They've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and they still feel crappy. What is going on? Well, that's what today's talk is about. And it's really about the intersection of the body, mind, heart, and soul, and how they get, it's one thing, right? That is one thing. And yet they get out of sync. And when they fall out of sync, what that does is inhibits your body's awesome healing capacity. And so we're going to talk about how do you reignite that awesome healing capacity.
Yeah, for me, this, even though I'm usually pretty chill, this is a very exciting subject for me. This is me all excited.
Yeah, not
Too many years as an ER nurse, I've learned to really keep in those things that I'm feeling on the inside, so sometimes that shows through, and I apologize. But this, for me, this was my missing link. This was the missing link in me becoming well. And, I self-navigated through my chronic illness for years because, just as Dr. Salt explained, I had done everything and bought the t-shirt, and I had lost hope. So for me, it was really life-changing to bring in that mental, emotional, spiritual piece. And once I really started keeping that in alignment, things started to change. And I'm wired to, you're wired to heal, but I'm also wired to be in that fight or flight state. Just with my personality and, I like to tell myself progress over perfection, but of course for years I was type A perfectionist, and that really, I think, drove my chronic illness and kept me from being well. And I still have to remind myself, this is an ongoing, lifelong process, that I can take time to, do those elements of self-love and self-care.
Yeah. So what kinds of things do you think were really pivotal for you? What things did you actually incorporate?
I incorporated a little bit of rest. It's
just that simple.
Yeah, you feel unwell, and you're always pushing that ceiling of what you can do, and you're always going a little bit above it. And, or at least I shouldn't speak for other people, but I was always pushing that ceiling.
For you too.
I was always pushing that ceiling and doing more than I needed to do. And once I really listened to my body, if I had a headache, you lay down and rest, you drink more fluids. Instead of just trying to do things so I would have enough energy to do things. So instead of, taking those steps just to have the energy to do the things I wanted to do, I actually listened to my body and did what it told me to do, which wasn't always on my productivity list. And then that's when things really started to change. So really bringing in those pieces of mindfulness, meditation, journaling. Sometimes it's just, I've incorporated daily where no matter what, I have to get up and I sit down and I drink my tea or my coffee, just depending on what, my flavor of the day is. And I think that's huge, just finding those little pieces. It doesn't have to be something that's huge, that's going to take up hours of your day. It's just doing it little bits by little bits.
Right. So, what about your internal talk? How did you feel about your productivity and your self-worth when your productivity fell because you were ill?
There's a lot of guilt. There was a lot of guilt in not being able to do the things I wanted to do, not being able to play at the park with my children. I always told myself I was lazy. And the self-talk that, when your child is sick, do you tell them that they're lazy? No. But I did. I would tell myself that I'm lazy and I need to get up and I need to do things. And I would, but I think that
at a tremendous cost.
Yeah, at a tremendous cost. And maybe if I would have gently, supported myself to do a few of the things that I like to do or the things that I needed to do in a loving, compassionate voice, that also might have changed. So the self-talk and the guilt of having the illness further just kind of perpetuated me into that.
So your self-talk goes really negative. I mean, we're talking here from central Minnesota in the middle of America, and we Americans are productive and production oriented. The very first question that Americans ask other people is, what do you do for a living? It's not,
Yeah.
and in many other parts of the country or world, I mean, that's considered absolutely rude. It's part of being that ugly American is, the first question is, what do you do for a living? And yet, so we think that our production is somehow our human value. And when we're ill and we lose that capacity to be productive, our self-worth falls apart. And when your self-worth falls apart, suddenly, you have a whole cast of physiological things that happen. You start to go into fight or flight. And so, what's fight or flight feel like for you?
For years, fight or flight was just who I was.
Just normal.
But it's kind of
And that's an important thing, because people who are locked in fight or flight don't even know it.
You don't realize it.
Right.
But it was just, it's more the symptoms that came from the fight or flight than being in fight or flight. I mean,
Right.
fight or flight also has a good feeling because it gets you going and gets you doing
Yeah,
things.
it's like somebody who's manic. They don't want any medicine to get them unmanic because they're really productive.
But the other things that fell out of it, like, my concentration or my memory started to suffer, and really my short-term memory. And I know people, I've seen many of the jokes about, I went into one room and I forgot what I was doing, so I would go into another room and then I forgot what I was going to do next. But that was kind of my life. It was just like it started spinning and spinning and spinning, and then my mind would spin out of control, and I couldn't really get anything accomplished.
Right. Just to talk about the physiology for a second, when you're in fight or flight, you're shunting blood away from your internal organs to your muscles so that you can fight or run, right? You're going to fight something off, or you're going to run away from it. You're going to climb a tree, you're going to get away somehow. When you shunt blood away from your gut, you're not digesting well, you're not absorbing well, so that means you become functionally deficient in building blocks and defensive molecules. Then 70% of your immune system lines your gut, so you're shunting blood away from your immune system, so you're becoming functionally immune deficient. And you're leaving fermentable product behind. In other words, you're not fully digesting your food, only some of it is getting absorbed. Stuff that shouldn't be left behind is left behind, and that fermentation alters your microbiome. And the microbiome is this teeming ecology of healthy, hopefully healthy bacteria and fungi and all kinds of stuff, right, that lives in your gut. And when that gets altered, it turns out that the microbiome has just activities that we're barely beginning to discover. It's absolutely critical for the development and function of your immune system. It helps with detoxification. There's actually evidence that the composition of your microbiome influences your food choices and even your mood. So just that one system, we haven't talked about the hormone system that it influences. We talked barely about the detoxification system that it influences. But just that one system influences like every aspect of your being. So just being in fight or flight has tremendous physiological implications. And so that's why we talk so much about this thing we call the limbic system. The limbic system is a part of the primitive mammalian brain, and it really governs. It's the intersection of your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, your emotional inputs, and your sensory inputs. And by managing that, so we call this rebalance to heal. By managing that, it soothes, in quotations, it normalizes, it rebalances these powerful inputs and allows all of that stuff to go into place. So your immune system comes back online, your digestion comes back online, your mood comes back online, your hormone balance comes back online. So this is not a trivial, it's faith healing. This is serious science. And so just talking a little bit about this rebalance to heal in this, limbic system. The limbic system, does it distinguish between a real threat, a remembered threat, an imagined threat?
No, they're all the same.
They're all the same. So
even just thinking of something, that's not occurring. So you could be thinking of anything, like actually being chased by a tiger, and to your body it becomes real and it responds in a way as though it's really happening. So think about all those thoughts that you think during the day. And then it's a wonder why you have so many gut issues because, you're shunting blood away from your gut. And, for me, that was another big symptom. Anytime I ate a meal, I was so uncomfortable afterwards.
And the brain is an unbelievably powerful but also complex thing. And you've heard of muscle memory, right? And you train. So you throw a ball, and so I'm looking at myself in this this monitor here. So I throw a ball, and I'm trying to throw it to myself, but I miss. I throw it over this way. So I realize I threw it the wrong place. So I throw it again, and it was too far that way. So I overcorrected. So I throw it again, and it's up here. Finally, I throw it, and I can catch it, right? And that's how we train ourselves. Well, all of these disease experiences are training our limbic system. And we sort of shortcut. We create these neural networks. So these neural networks are like hardwired memories. And so, you get to a place in your chronic illness where everything begins to look like a threat. So that weird smell, somebody walked by with a weird perfume, that's a threat. You go into a candle shop and you smell the candles, and ooh, that's a threat. It's sensory overwhelm. Even if it smells good, it's sensory overwhelm. It's too much. And it ignites those neural networks to tell your body to have your defensive response. And that perpetuates your illness. It puts you into fight or flight. It shuts down your immune system. And so, let's say you have chronic Lyme disease as an example. The chronic Lyme disease has robbed you of your life in many ways, right? You're fatigued all the time. You've hurt all the time. Everything's terrible. And that puts you in fight or flight because now your self-esteem is down. I mean, everything collapses. And I was listening to a talk the other day, and he was saying, if you think about it, you start right here, and if good things are happening, more good things tend to happen, and you get better kind of exponentially. But the same thing is true. If you're right here and bad things happen, more bad things tend to happen, and you get sick exponentially. It's not linear. It's a curve. It's boom, right off a cliff. And so we have to interrupt that, and part of it is retraining these neural networks. It's not all of it. Disease is not only in your head. To the extent that bugs are in your head, it's in your head, but your limbic system is a powerful piece of your healing journey that is often neglected. And so this rebalance to heal idea is really powerful and critical for most people, for the vast majority of people who have been sick for a long time. So when you think about that, when you think about that kind of exponential decrease and then, exponential improvement, and you think about your own healing journey, how do you see that sort of falling off a cliff? How did that happen in your life?
It was a collection of things,
Yeah.
I think, and it was more like little cliffs, and then
Lots
all
of
this,
little cliffs.
Yeah, lots of little cliffs. Things
That you almost don't notice at first.
Right, but when you're in fight or flight, it doesn't take much to push you over that cliff because you're already on the edge.
Right.
Where normal, autonomic balance is down here, you're always up here on the peak. So it doesn't, the negativity, it doesn't take much to, there goes another cliff and there goes another cliff. So for me, I can't even come back to like one significant thing.
Right. Most people can't.
No, I can come back to one illness where I know that I really started, I feel like, the cliffs. But it was just a series of events.
Right. So, if you're thinking, well, gosh, I would know if this was happening. Yeah, probably not. Because our brains are designed to solve problems, right? They are generalized problem-solving devices. And I don't feel good, so I make up all kinds of reasons. I don't feel good. Well, it's probably because I ate this, or it's probably because I did this, or it's probably because I thought about that. And then the next cliff comes along, and you go, well, I've been limping along not feeling good, but suddenly I feel worse again. But, it's just life, and I got to push through and whatever. And so it's this insidious thing that just slowly, it happens. It's the frog in the pot, right? The old story, terrible story, but the old story, you put a frog in some nice cool water, and you slowly raise the temperature of the water, and pretty soon the frog is sitting in boiling water and doesn't jump out because he didn't sense the change.
Right. When it's small changes, you don't notice it until you look back and you're like, wow, the change in me is very significant. And often it doesn't come until you actually physically can't do the things you need to do. That's the only thing that stopped me, is I physically could no longer do what I needed to do. So my body, basically was yelling at me to, hey, stop, slow down.
A good friend of mine who happens to be the past president of the Institute for Functional Medicine, Dr. David Jones, fantastic guy, really mentor of mine. He tells a story of himself. He's a tennis player and whatever, very active, physically fit guy, but he had this back problem. And one day in the middle of the night, he was called to the hospital to deliver a baby, and he finds himself dragging his right leg across the parking lot because his back hurt so bad. And he thought, maybe I should look into this. But it took it getting to that degree of disability before he thought, self-care. But that's how we all are. We just push and push and push. And the common theme, in my experience, the common theme for almost everyone with a long-term chronic disabling disease of the sort of weird type, autoimmune processes, or chronic Lyme or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, or all of those, they're almost always very productive, highly functional, type A people who pushed themselves right over the cliff because they weren't going to let this disease slow them down, right? So it's not that the people who get these weird diseases are these lazy, as she thought, lazy people who just, have to lay in bed. These are highly driven people who have sort of ignored their own needs. So my giant Newfoundland is moving around here, and he's about to bang the tripod. So we'll see how that goes. How you doing, buddy? He snuck out here while we were setting up, and it was easier to let him lay there instead of moving him. But anyway, we'll see if it appears to be an earthquake. It's probably just Grizzly Bunsen on the tripod. Anyhow, we're going to be doing a series. We have a program called Rebalance to Heal. It's about limbic system health. It's about bringing that body, mind, heart, and soul back into synchronicity, right? And that's where you unleash that healing response. Because as long as your tape is, you lousy sack of steaming dung, it's not gonna come out. The healing energy is not gonna come out. But as long as you're doing the diet, you're doing the lifestyle, and you're doing all the right things, this isn't it's not some faith healing. This is real physiology. You gotta have the building blocks. So it's layers and layers and layers and layers of whole life wellness. And this is one of the layers. And for those of you who, again, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, done all the diets, I've done everything, I've been everywhere, there's just no hope. There is hope. There's always hope. And there's things that can be done to help. And I think Elizabeth and many other of our patients are absolutely testimonies to the fact that there's always hope. I mean, you mentioned early on, just in this recording, that you'd really lost hope.
I had lost hope, and as you're talking about kind of the perpetuating things and the entire limbic system, and calling yourself a steaming pile of
dung or whatever.
It's right before you said that, I actually into my mind popped that for me a main component of balancing my limbic system was coming to a place of self-love and self-acceptance.
Yep.
And really, when I did that, I could let go of some of that striving and perfection, because I felt I needed to accomplish to be worthy. And I'm worthy just as I am.
So there's a beautiful saying that you sort of coined. Go ahead and say about
Yes. Don't wait to love yourself until you make changes. Love yourself and then watch the change.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really powerful. So many of us, me included, we're trying to become better people, and we think, well, if I just could do this better, then I could love myself. But the truth is, love yourself. And that's not an easy thing for most of us, right? Because we're very, very well aware of our own flaws. But the point is, loving yourself doesn't mean you think you're perfect. I mean, you probably don't think your spouse is perfect. You don't think your kids are perfect. You don't think your mother and father are perfect. You don't think your aunts and uncles are perfect. And you don't think your best friend's perfect, but you love them. You love them. And probably, like your children, you love them beyond unconditionally. Because of their imperfection, right? That's the love we're talking about. And when you start to love yourself like that, suddenly all of those nasty little things that make you feel like a giant steaming sack of dung just don't matter anymore. They're okay. It's okay that I'm imperfect. I am human. And suddenly changes happen. And what does that do to you physiologically? All the things we already talked about in reverse, right? So blood flow returns to your gut. You fall out of fight or flight. Your immune system gets fully nourished. Your body becomes fully nourished. Your hormones rebalance. All these beautiful things happen. But they happen on top of a foundation, which is a healthy diet and lifestyle, right? So it's not one, it's not this or, it's yes and. So that's really what we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. We have a program, it's 6 stages, I believe. I wrote it myself in infinite detail, and I can't remember exactly how many stages because each stage has multiple sub-stages. But we're going to dive in to this and go through it in some detail so you have a lot of understanding of what it is and what it's about. And if there are any questions or wonderments about what we've talked about or comments about what we've been talking about, we'd love to entertain them. I think maybe this time of day with short notice isn't the best place. Thanks a lot, Denise, for being here. And otherwise, any other words of encouragement?
Just when it comes to, loving yourself, it's not just like, yes, of course, I love myself. It comes with a feeling. So, it's the feeling of loving yourself. And, you say you love your children, but when you see your child like laying in bed sleeping, like that feeling you get,
Yeah.
you have
When the little monster's asleep.
Yeah. You have to create that same feeling for yourself.
So how many jobs that you loved did you really have to back out of because of health concerns?
All of them I had to, I was pretty consistently changing how much I worked because at home my husband had a job where he was gone a lot and was very busy, so I was the full-time person at home and also working. So I had to change pretty consistently between, okay, I can only work part-time now, or okay, I can work full-time for a little bit, and then, I have to go to casual because I just can't maintain everything. So, if you look at my my work history, I was at places for longevity, but the ability I was able to work consistently fluctuated.
And
just
so,
depending on how I was feeling. Like I would work to the point of, I just can't do this anymore, I'm sorry.
And so how did that really affect your sense of self and your feelings of accomplishment and all that kind of thing?
It left me feeling like I couldn't hold my end of the deal. So I couldn't excel in anything. I couldn't excel in my job. I couldn't excel at home. There was so many different things that I was doing that I felt like I was failing at everything.
Failing at your job, failing at being a mom, failing at being everything in your life. And that's just...
So between that feeling and that negative self-talk that I did week after week, month after month, I was not nice to myself.
Yeah.
No.
And again, this doesn't mean that your illness is in your head. It means that your brain is a powerful part of the totality of who you are in terms of governing your immune system, governing your hormone system, governing your GI system, governing every aspect of your wellness. And by getting that part of things in alignment, you can have the greatest foundation. Like I said in the beginning, people, they eat all the right diet, they've done all the right diets, they've done all the right supplements, they've done all this stuff, and yet they're not getting well. And what is going on? Well, it's like the old saying, it's hard to put a fire out when you're continuing to pour gasoline on it. And all of this limbic system imbalance and these trained neural networks that continue to fire off all the time because we haven't figured out how to retrain them. One more example. We're kind of on time, but this is important. People with chronic illness don't sleep well, almost universally, right? And it is during REM sleep that you sort of detach the negative emotional content from memories, right? So if you're chronically unwell, you keep those negative emotional attachments to your memories. And we said earlier that the limbic system can't tell the difference between an imagined event, a remembered event, and a real event. So if you have these negative emotional, there goes the earthquake. That was grisly. If you have these emotional attachments to these memories, and these memories are continuously to flood you, they are going to have negative impacts on your immune system over and over and over and over. So, part of this whole rebalance to heal is we got to get you to sleep. We got to get you into healthy sleep. And the problem is...
And why aren't you sleeping well? Well, you're not sleeping well because you're in fight or flight.
Right.
How many people wake up at 3 a.m. thinking of all the things they need to do the next day? Well, guess what? You didn't wake up and start thinking that. when you were sleeping, you were still in that state, and it got to be
Yeah.
to a point where it woke you up.
And all the drugs that are out there to make you conk out and fall asleep, they do not improve your REM sleep, almost universally, right? They, in fact, some of them make it worse. So there are other strategies for sleeping, and that's a big part of the program. It's step 3 actually, but step 1 is some supplements to kind of soothe things. Steps 2 is a kind of biofeedback meditation technique. Step 3 is when we get into sleep and all that stuff, because trying to start with sleep, well, when your world is like this all the time, you're not going to sleep until we get something else going for you. So it's a carefully thought out map to fixing your physiology and reprogramming those neural networks. So we'll talk more and more about this. We've got about 7 more weeks or so, 6 or 7 more weeks to talk about this subject, and we'll go from there. So thank you all for being here. Barb, hi.
Hi, Barb.
And we'll talk next week at 10 a.m. Central. All right.